Yosi Amram, welcome to the conversation today.
Thank you, John. Delighted to be here with you, and I'm enjoying your smile here already. So it should be a good one, I hope. I
It is
trust.
a pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from the Bay Area. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking about the role of spiritual intelligence and how it can complement emotional intelligence. We talk about EQ a lot in the workplace and how important that is. I don't think we talk about the spiritual as much, but when we talk about the various components of humanity, I think that spiritual component is just as important. And I also want, just on the outset of this, we're not talking here, when we talk about spiritual, we're not talking about organized religion. That is, important to a lot of people, and I don't want to diminish that. But we're not going to talk about religion today. We're not talking about organized religion. We're talking about spiritual intelligence, and that is something distinct. So I just wanted to say that from the outset. As we get started, I wanted to share a little bit about Yosi and his background and a little bit of his bio. Yosi Amram, PhD, is a distinguished psychologist and executive coach, catering to CEOs, entrepreneurs, and other influential leaders, and a pioneer researcher in the field of spiritual intelligence, holding an MBA from Harvard University and a PhD from Sophia University in clinical transpersonal psychology. Dr. Amram is committed to enabling individuals to unlock their potential through spiritual intelligence, which is a profound connection to the core of one's existence, their spirit, which inspiration and their deepest interconnectedness resides. That enriches their overall functioning, improves their effectiveness, and enhances their well-being. I really love that. And Yosi, anything you would like to highlight by way of your background or personal context before we dive on in further?
Wow, I could tell my whole life story, but which led me to here. I'll just say, if I could quickly summarize it, I started my journey into leadership in the Israeli military. I was drafted, even though I was pacifist and so on, and I was a shy little kid. I didn't think I would get into leadership, but somehow I had the fastest promotion record in the history of my regiment, won all these awards. But even though I was successful at it, the command and control model of the military, though effective and necessary in battle, chafed at my soul. And I resolved to someday build organizations based on more humane values that bring out the best in people. And that led me to be an entrepreneur. I started and founded two companies that I took public. And but along the way, I had sort of a personal crisis, a dark night of the soul, which led to a spiritual awakening and I ultimately got pushed out of the company. It was a very turbulent time for me, but in trying to understand it, I ultimately went back to study psychology and try to understand it. And that's what led me to the concept of spiritual intelligence, which was formulated by someone else before me, Dana Zohar, but it wasn't really operationalized and there was no measure for it. And so I wanted to see if it, and a lot analogous to emotional intelligence, as you said, and can show that it contributes to leadership and effectiveness and fulfillment, which my research has shown. And now it has over 1,000 academic citations, and there are other validated instruments to measure spiritual intelligence. My instrument's been translated into over a half dozen languages and shown to contribute to a variety of positive outcomes in different cultural contexts and language environment and cultures and so on. So anyway, I'll stop there.
Yeah, well, and as I go back, so my PhD's in sociology, and as I think back to some of the theorists that I studied, this is way back before I started to do it, doing consulting work and work with organizations and coaching and such. Going back to the European theorists and intellectuals and such. I remember a fellow, I think he was a German, Habermas, and he talked about the interconnectedness to self and the other, and he didn't operationalize anything, the way you're doing, but he theorized around the real importance behind this. And he didn't talk explicitly in terms of spiritual, but my recollection is everything he talked about, I think today we could talk about in terms of what exactly you're saying. This spiritual awakening, this spiritual connectedness. And again, it has nothing to do with, whether or not someone feels like they're a religious person or not, whether or not someone feels like they have a belief in deity or not. That's something that's important to a lot of people, but that's something that's different. But this idea of spiritual and awakening and connectedness to self and others, that is a spiritual thing that people have been talking about. Philosophers have been discussing for millennia, and it is, I mean, as I think about myself and I think about what alivens me and gets me up in the morning, it's a really, really important part. So you have secular spiritualists, you have humanists, you have certainly religious people who are spiritual, you have the whole spectrum of people who try to tap into their spirituality, because it is a really important part of what it means to be human, and how we relate to one another. And so, I just find that a really powerful thing. And we talk all the time about emotional intelligence and how important that is. We talk about the emotional quotient, the love quotient. We talk about these different, types of frameworks and these different measures. Why not talk about the spiritual piece a little bit more? And it's because it's a little taboo, right? Like we get a little bit nervous about talking about that in the workplace. Maybe we feel like it's a little bit too fluffy for the workplace. But
Yeah.
it's a really huge piece of what it means to be human and how we relate to one another. And so what have you found to be some effective ways to start to bridge this conversation with, maybe a hard-nosed CEO or executive who's used to, driving performance?
Yeah, that's great. You're saying so much. I had so many thoughts about what you said. But let's just start with the word spiritual. The root word is spirit. What is spirit? It's the animating breath of life. So fundamentally, our spirit is our life force. And when we think about organizations and leaders, what do leaders do? They inspire. So basically, they breathe life, passion, purpose, a vision into their organization. So that's first thing, to understand the connection between the core of the word and our life force. It doesn't need to be anything too woo-woo, like you
Yeah.
said, a belief in God or whatever. Secondly, to distinguish between being spiritual, religious, which you did a good job, and then spiritual intelligence. So now let me ask you, do you know someone in your life that you would consider emotional?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, and do you know someone in your life you would consider emotionally intelligent?
Sure.
Is it the same person?
Sometimes, but not always, certainly.
Uh, Okay, so the point is, being emotional is not the same as being
Right.
emotionally intelligent. Same thing, being spiritual is not the same as being spiritually intelligent. So spiritual, you can have all kinds of interest in the deeper meaning, our transcendent, the sacred dimension of life. But spiritual intelligence is very analogous to emotional intelligence. What is emotional intelligence? At its core, it's a concept that was put forward by two academicians in 1990, Salovey and Meyer, and then popularized by Goldman. But basically, the core definition is the awareness, the ability to be aware of and regulate our own and others' emotions, basically drawing on emotional resources for managing our own and others' emotions. So spiritual intelligence, by analogy, is the ability to draw on and embody spiritual qualities and resources that have been hailed by all the world's traditions, and to help our daily functioning and well-being. So they say, what are those? That would be passionate purpose, compassionate service, gratitude, humility, integrity, trust. And the beautiful thing is that now in the field of modern positive psychology, these qualities have been shown to contribute to our well-being and functioning. Now, the other amazing thing is that these qualities have been celebrated as virtues by all the world's traditions.
Yeah.
And regardless of their cosmology, whether you believe in a deity like God, whether you believe in Father Sky, Mother Earth, in like more in shamanic tradition, yin and yang, and Taoism, Buddha nature, no self. So all the world's traditions have different cosmology and theology, but they have always come back to these basic qualities. And so my research, interviewing 71 teachers that were nominated by their peers, as those that embody and walk the talk in their lives highlighted these 22 qualities of spiritual intelligence that are universal. And then, the fact is, then I operationalized that into a measure and did scientific studies to show that leaders, I did a study with 42 CEOs and 210 members of their staff, showing that leaders that scored higher on spiritual intelligence led teams with higher morale, greater commitment, lower turnover. And I also controlled for emotional intelligence and personality, which are other factors that are known to affect leadership. And so emotional intelligence, if I'm going to get nerdy a little bit, explained 41% of the variance on the leadership effectiveness outcome. Spiritual intelligence explained 46% of the variance. Combined, they explained 67%. So that shows you sort of from scientific standpoint that they're complementary capacities and both contribute to leadership. So now I will also say that since my research, others have taken the instrument I developed, and in one case, it was shown that leaders that scored higher on spiritual intelligence produced better financial results for their organization. That was not found, in fact, for another measure of emotional intelligence. Again, I'm not trying to knock it down, but I'm just saying that there are bottom line results from this. There was another study that looked at a bunch of banks and looked at the average level of spiritual intelligence among their employees. And the banks and the organizations that had higher level of spiritual intelligence on average produced better ROI in those institutions compared to their others. So the bottom line is that this is measurable and impactful, and it translates into good bottom line from a financial standpoint. And at a human level, it results in greater satisfaction of life, better quality of life, deeper meaning, better relationships, and so on. So, now 15 years after my research, there's, an exploding body of research around how to measure spiritual intelligence and how it contributes to a variety of positive outcomes. So this isn't woo-woo, is all I'm trying to say.
Yeah, so there's a clear, there's a human case for it. That's what I was saying. There's a business case for it. That's what you were just expressing. And there's really a scientific basis for it, which you were just expressing as well, actual scientific peer-reviewed studies, etc. So if we can accept that, and maybe that's still a little bit hard for some people who are listening to accept, but I would encourage you to, don't just take our word for it. Like, go look up some of the research behind this, because it really does exist, and there really is evidence for this. But I'm going to move forward and just assume now that people have accepted the premise that there is both a human case and a business case and a scientific
Or at least
case.
a possibility.
At least the possibility for this. Now, how can leaders go about accessing this spiritual intelligence? Because if it really is something that humans have, if it's innately within us, how do we start to access it and to kind of exercise that muscle?
Yeah, well, let me just also highlight that just like IQ is a multidimensional construct. So when we speak of IQ intelligence, it has verbal comprehension, verbal writing, spatial reasoning, mathematical logical, memory, processing speed. So spiritual intelligence has these 22 qualities that I identified. So, it's not a single thing now, but the core of it starts from connecting to our we might say our spirit essence, which is our life force. So, right now, how do we experience our life force in our body? It starts with connecting with our breath. So we can take a couple deep breaths right now and feel our breath, and then feel our pulsing heartbeat through the body, wherever we feel it. So those are the biological expressions of our life force. And then we can ground ourselves through our feet and legs and feel the verticality of our spine. And all of a sudden, our sense of self enlarges. And when we're connected and rooted in this place of centeredness and groundedness and feeling our sense of aliveness, we feel bigger, we feel stronger, we feel more centered, we feel more grounded. And from there, we could start to tap into some of the individual qualities. So for example, one of them is purpose, which is crucial. We all talk about a sense of purpose. So, life is a gift that has been given to each of us. And along with that basic gift of life, we've been given other gifts, some, different talents, different superpowers. Some people are great in math and, their gift is to be a great programmer. Somebody else is a great artist and they're a graphic designer. Someone else is a musician. Someone else is what have you. So each of us have our own unique gifts, and then we feel most fulfilled when we actualize those gifts and use them to serve others. So that's a beginning of saying, okay, I want to find my purpose, because when we live with purpose, life has deeper meaning. We wake up in the morning and we feel like, okay, there's some meaning, some reason for my existence, and I want to actualize those gifts and I want to use them in service of others. So that's one of them, and then another quality might be gratitude. There's all this research now about the benefits of gratitude. So we want to cultivate gratitude. So we start with a gratitude practice. My point is that, we in developing these 22 qualities, we pick one at a time and we work on it in building habits. So it's just like building the muscle of that quality. And, I recommend that people focus for 1 month on one quality, build some set of practices on it, some habits. And then as you master that, then you move on to the next. So, just like emotional intelligence, not a once and done. You don't read a book about emotional intelligence and you say, oh, I'm emotionally intelligent now. It's rewiring ourselves, setting new neural pathways and developing these muscles along these different dimensions. So I hope I'm giving you a flavor of how one can go about it.
Yeah, I think that's really good. And there really are just simple things like basic practices that we can start to establish and develop some habits. Like you said, we're establishing some new neural pathways. So this isn't, you said the one and done. Of course, it's not going to be a one and done kind of a thing. It's not going to be that New Year's resolution that you stick to for 2 weeks and then you kind of fall off the horse and then you fall into your old habits. That's not going to work either. Like, it really is something that you're going to get into, breath work, meditative practices, mindfulness practices, whatever, that will allow you to get into those regular kind of attunement spaces. And it could be a whole bunch of things, right? Like you mentioned earlier, if you're a religious person, regardless of your religious background, all of the major religions have these practices, right? Name any any world religion, they have these types of practices. Name any major type of mindfulness, major mindfulness movement, it has these types of practices. Everything has these types of practices. So pick your thing. Like, we're not going to advocate for any specific thing, but just pick something, get consistent with it, and you'll start to notice that you feel better, like you feel different and you feel more connected, and stay consistent with it. And if you do that, it makes all the difference in the world. And then that just, it really does start to rewire your neural pathways. So then it's not even something you have to think about, really, and you're tapping into something different than maybe you did before. But that is hard, especially if you have a whole lifetime of different brain patterns and different ways of thinking and different frameworks and different ways of making sense of the world. It's going to take some time to disrupt that, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, nobody expects to be in good, healthy shape going to the gym once and you're done. You go to the gym however many times. You take your daily walks or your weekly weightlifting thing. So it is an ongoing process, but there's no reason to think that reprogramming our consciousness and bringing forth our life force in its great fullest expression is going to be any simpler or easier. If anything, it's more complicated and more nuanced. So yeah, and I had another thought, but it escaped me. I'll come back.
Yeah, well, excellent. So we've been talking about leaders a little bit and how leaders can start to foster this both within themselves and hopefully set a good example for their workers, their employees, who also can start to foster it. Let's focus a little bit more now on employees. How can employees start to feel this? You know, if you're feeling overworked, you're feeling overwhelmed, how do you start to take a step back to implement more spiritual intelligence to help with the distress, the disbalance, the overwhelm, the overwork, so that you can start to get to a place of balance. You know, the challenge here is you can't always control your external environment, right? Sometimes you can, and sometimes you need to get out of there. Like if it's an abusive environment, an abusive relationship, an abusive organization, like sometimes you just need to get out of there. But a lot of times we don't have like a huge amount of control over our external environment. So how do we start to implement the spiritual intelligence when we're in distress?
Yeah, okay, great. So what you just said actually reminded me what I wanted to touch on, which is there's the external and the internal. The thing about spiritual intelligence, it's pointing us to our internal, our life force, our own spirit, and the inner resources that exist within us, and cultivating these virtues so that our own happiness and fulfillment and meaning and sense of purpose is in our control, and we feel empowered. If we feel that my happiness depends on this, that, or the other externally, then we're victims to reality, to the external world. So that's a key piece. So now going back to someone who's embedded in an organization, I think, first of all, we have to take care of ourselves. So one analogy I like to think about is that we're each an individual cell embedded in a larger organ, which is embedded in a larger organism. So each cell in our body, each cell in your body has to take care of itself for it to function optimally to serve the organ it is part of, whether it's part of your heart or part of your kidney, part of your brain, whatever it might be, or a muscle tissue. So the cell itself has to have its own integrity and self-care. But then it understands that it's functioning within the context of that organ. So that would be your department, your team, whether it's customer service or product engineering or marketing or sales. You have to take care of yourself. You have to find a way to align yourself into that organ that you're a part of. And then you have to think about how this organ, this team, functions in the context of the overall organism, which is the company or the broader organization we're a part of. So it starts with self-care, and then it starts with identifying our own purpose, and then what is the purpose of this team that I'm on? Whether it be customer service. So our purpose is to ensure the highest quality service and so on. Or it could be engineering, and our mission and purpose is to develop the most innovative products, etc. So what is the value? What is the function of the unit I'm embedded in? And how does that tap into my natural talents so that I can express them in support of that? So then I get an alignment between my individual cell and my organ that I'm part of, and then the broader organism I'm a part of. And then I start to feel like I'm part of a community and not just a random collection. I mean, community is such a fundamental part for our well-being as human beings. We're social animals, and it's such a critical thing at our time where people are working remotely. But the bulk of our waking hours is spent at work
Yeah.
more than anything else. So having a shared sense of purpose and mission and vision and values and mutuality of care between people, embeds us into that web of the organization, that web of life of that organization, that organism that gives us meaning, connection to ourselves and to the entity we're part of. And I think it's so important to feel that we're not lonely, not isolated. We're part of something bigger, working towards a common purpose with a shared set of values with people who care about each other. That's so critical for our individual well-being, as well as avoiding toxic political environments in the workplace.
Yeah, I completely agree. And Yosi, I note the time. Unfortunately, we're running out of time. We've only really just scratched the surface here. I'm going to need to let you go and get on with your busy day. But before we wrap things up for today, I wanted to give you a chance to share with the audience how they can connect with you, find out more about your work, maybe where they can go to learn more about what we've been talking about here today, and then give us the final word on the topic for today.
Okay. So first, I have written a book called Spiritually Intelligent Leadership, How to Inspire by Being Inspired. It's available on all the online stores, etc. It received the gold medal award in a book competition. So I'm kind of excited and proud about that. It includes case studies of clients. It has exercises that people could do for self-guidance. So you can work on these. It's not just a book you read, you work those capacities in these domains. I do have a website that's yosiamram.net, and it connects to my coaching website. I also have a website where people could do assessment of their spiritual intelligence. There's a free assessment that gives you a profile of your strengths. So one of my strengths is, it might be gratitude or mindfulness or joy. But my sense of purpose is something I can need to work on more, etc. So it's personalized, and there are tips for development. I also host Awakening SI monthly events that are free. Each month we work on one quality. So in just under 2 weeks, the event is happening. Is going to be on the quality of compassion, which is really an alchemical process whereby we can turn our suffering, the leaded weight of suffering, into the warm-hearted connection and the golden value of that. So I offer that. I have my YouTube channel at Awakening Spiritual Intelligence, where there are 1-minute micro meditation practices to help in cultivating these qualities. So, but it's all pointed out to at yosiamram.net as my website, and from there you can connect. Yeah.
Wonderful. Yosi, again, this has just been a real pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, to get connected, find out more about what Yosi can do for you. Check out the book, the resources, all the great things that Yosi is doing. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great